And welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. It's Wednesday. I would normally say we've got Prime Minister's questions, but of course we haven't, because that's all up and done for until something like the end of November. They won't be back for many, many months because they've got so much to do. You'd think in the midst of a cost of living crisis, an energy crisis, a health crisis, a banking crisis, they might actually be sitting around doing things. But no. They've all got to go away and have their R&R. I don't blame the family holidays. Michael Gove yesterday told everyone he was going to Greece. And he said nobody should be stopped from going to Greece just because of a few fires. I think I tend to agree with him, actually. But let's say a very good morning to William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party. William, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Morning, Mike.
Morning. Sorry to bring you the bad news that junior doctors still aren't happy and they're going to have yet another strike from Friday, August the 11th to Tuesday, August the 15th. So whatever you do, don't fall ill during that particular period or they won't help you.
Yeah, I've commented on this before. What the junior doctors are trying to do, they're making a mistake of trying to correct the 15-year lag in their salary and conditions overnight, and they're trying to do this in a cost of living crisis and the situation where the government can't balance its books, so it's not tenable, and I would urge them to be more realistic.
Yes, I think being more realistic would be a big help for them. And also, why do they always have to strike at the weekends? It's always Fridays and Thursdays they start the strike. The last one started on Thursday and went for 5 days. This one starts on Friday and goes for 4 days. But, I mean, I'm sure they'll all be having a lovely time somewhere on the Costa del Sol. Yeah,
that may be just a coincidence that it happens on a weekend, Mike. I'm not really sure, but there's certainly, I mean, in principle, it does make sense if you're going to strike. The purpose of a strike is to inconvenience the public, isn't it, and to exercise...
well, yeah, I mean, the purpose of a strike is to inconvenience the public if you're a train driver, but not if you're a doctor, for God's sake. Why would you want to inconvenience people who are sick?
Well, that's what's happening. I mean, that as I say, I mean, I've said it before, they put in you cannot correct a chronic, long-term degradation in your wages overnight. It's just ridiculous. You cannot do that. What you can do is negotiate an increase this year and next year and slowly try and claw it back. They're not being realistic. They should look at what the nurses have done. And the nurses started off at asking for 20% and they've settled for far less. So I think they should be realistic and get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk about the biggest story that the banking sector has seen, I think, since the almost collapse of NatWest back in 2008. This is quite an extraordinary story. I can't quite believe how wrong NatWest have got this. Every single step of the way, they've got it wrong, haven't they?
Well, they've certainly got the comms, in inverted commas, wrong, and they've certainly made grave errors by leaking or talking about client information to external actors. That's a mistake, but I would just go further back than that. I think it's utterly reprehensible for banks to be debanking people because of their political beliefs. And further, I think it's utterly reprehensible for so many commentators to wade in and basically back the bank against Nigel Farage and others, again, nakedly, because they just disagree with his politics. We can't live in a society where people are debanked and you've got woke capitalists going through people's records and going through people's social media profiles to find out what they believe, to ask them, find out whether they want to provide services for them. It's utterly ridiculous. I mean, I think woke capitalism is one of the most ridiculous things that has emerged over the last sort of 5 and 10 years. And the problem is, Mike, as soon as an eye is cast over the organizations themselves, it falls apart, all of this stuff. So, it doesn't surprise me at all. I tweeted last night, that Alison Rose's position was utterly untenable, bye-bye, and then a few hours later, of course, she goes. And it's interesting, isn't it, Mike, that the dreaded, confirmation that the chairman backs you is a bit like the football manager's chairman backing the manager, and about 5 hours later she goes.
Yeah, except that in the difference, I suppose, between that and football is that usually in football, you say we've got you've got the full backing of the owners and all the rest of it, and then normally there's another loss or something, or they lose the next game, and then he's gone. But in this case, I was absolutely aghast yesterday when I saw NatWest's statement that she had admitted being the person who leaked the story to Simon Jack, the BBC business correspondent. The fact that they then said, when they were asked by the BBC if this story was good to go, and they said yes, it was. And the fact that they then said they still had confidence in her, despite the fact that not only has she breached the confidentiality of a client, but potentially she may have broken the actual law.
How can you have how can you have confidence in someone that's breached confidentiality of a client? It's just it's completely ridiculous.
Well, it's fundamental. Surely it's fundamental to the running of a bank, which is that you don't go around telling people secrets about other people's bank accounts.
Totally, that's a major mistake, and I think the FCA should have a look at that. Actually, certainly in theory, political belief is protected under the Act. So, you know, I think there are so many errors here, and the problem is, go back to the source. We know what the source is, Mike. The source is that we've got institutional capture. It's not just the banks, it's the Church of England, it's local authorities, it's government, all sorts of agencies all over the place have forgotten what their core role is. The core role of a bank is to provide you with banking services. It's not to go swooping and snooping into people's political beliefs like the Stasi. It's like East Germany. And it's got to stop. And as I say, I've been disappointed by this story. It was the reaction of so many others, actually, that weighed it in. I have disagreements with Nigel Farage on one or two matters, but I think it was utterly reprehensible for someone to be debanked because of their political opinions. And by the way,
but that's also the part that's illegal, because apparently there is an EU law, which maybe not those of us who don't know that minutiae of EU law don't know about, but apparently it is illegal to debank somebody because you don't like their politics.
Well, it's illegal under UK law because it breaches the Equality Act, Mike, because the Equality Act protects personal beliefs. So, you know, the whole thing is ridiculous. And always, we've got to remind ourselves that NatWest is owned partly by us, 39%. We bailed this bank out in the banking crisis in 2008. We own 39% of it. And I would say, you know, since on Brexit, the majority mainstream position in this country was to leave the EU. It seems ridiculous for a bank that was supported by that public to go around rooting around people's political opinions and cancelling them. And Coots, this is the ridiculous thing. This is what, at the heart of this, the basic problem with this, Mike, is woke capitalism is inherently dishonest, basically. Coots is an exclusive bank, a very, very exclusive bank, and it's pretending that it's inclusive, and it ain't inclusive.
No.
And the ridiculous Coots reputational risk committee has basically trashed its reputation.
Yes, and that was a reputational committee set up entirely and utterly by Dame Alison Rose. It was her committee. And when she said originally, and what I'm mostly perturbed about is the conduct of NatWest throughout this whole investigation, because first of all, they leak a story to the BBC which turns out not to be true. They pretend basically that she had nothing to do with the decision, which is clearly wrong. They pretended as well that she had nothing to do with the committee and that the views of the committee were nothing to do with her, also wrong. They then reveal that basically, there has been somebody who has said something to someone, but she puts out a statement apologising to Nigel Farage without mentioning that she's the source. A week later, she then admits to being the source. I mean, the whole thing stinks of complete and utter incompetence and diversionary tactics.
That's just normal incompetence. But what I'm really concerned about, for the public's sake, is what is underneath this. What's underneath it? And you only need to look at the various MEPs and other people that were debanked and their families that were debanked because banks didn't like what they were saying. Underneath this, there are probably tens of thousands of people who've had their bank accounts arbitrarily removed. And remember, I mean, again, I have differences with Reform UK and Reclaim, but you speak to those parties, they were political parties that found it very, very difficult to get bank accounts.
Yeah.
That is a ridiculous situation in a democracy. And I think the FCA should look at it, and if necessary, I mean, I know the government acted reasonably quickly, But the Tories, it's on their watch, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what they tend to do is react when things go wrong. It'd be nice if they put laws in place to stop this happening in the first place.
Well, they're supposed to be putting laws in place, but I'm not sure that they ever will, because at the end of the day, the government says they're going to do an awful lot of things, which they end up not actually doing. But the question a lot of people are asking me is, how much of a payoff will she get? Will she receive some kind of remuneration as a compensation for being fired? I mean, I personally don't think she should, and I think we should have a say in that, given that we own a third of the bank.
Well, it's our money, Mike.
Yeah.
It's our money. And I think this is another scandal that's gone on for years. The remuneration committees, the REMCOMs, have upped the salaries of these executives for years and years and years, and you end up earning millions and millions of pounds a year for not doing a very good job, which isn't right. But that's at the heart of it, Mike. This is the whole point. You ask yourself why woke is so popular among, diversity inclusion initiatives are so popular among these large organizations. And I'll tell you why, Mike. It's because it's a very good way of distracting attention away from inequality and, these massive pay rises they get. And let's talk about rainbow flags and rainbow laces this week, and just hopefully you'll ignore the fact that I'm paid £5 million and I don't do a very good job.
But shouldn't this then be a wake-up call to the woke, if you will, on the basis that, you can't hide behind, diversity and inclusion. You can't hide behind rainbow flags and gender-neutral toilets. If you don't do your job, you shouldn't be allowed to do it. And they need to get people in. This woman was hired, having only ever worked at NatWest. She's only ever had one job in her life. She went to NatWest when she was in her early 20s after university, and she's never been anywhere else, right? She was appointed, I think in 2019 or 2018, in order to salvage the reputation of the bank, to make it more diverse, to make it more inclusive, to make it less sexist. Nothing to do with banking, everything to do with wokery.
Yeah, I mean, this is everywhere, Mike. I mean, it literally is everywhere. Everything is about comms and everything's about posturing. And so many organisations have forgotten what their core function is. I mean, actually, I follow there's a very large, I won't name it, but there's a very large corporation, a global corporation, which I follow. And if you look at their annual reports, there's a section in it which says political and charitable contributions, nil. And it says nil every single year, and it's a very successful company, and they just carry on doing what they do, and they don't need to get into any of this.
Right.
I think we should get back to a situation where core functions in government and in these other organisations are the prime order.
Absolutely right. More bad news for Alison Rose, even as we speak. She's apparently immediately going to step down from 2 major Downing Street roles. And this again tells you more about the way that the wokeists kind of inveigle their way into every single aspect of our lives. The now former CEO of NatWest apparently was a top advisor to the Energy Efficiency Task Force, which is in the Net Zero department, believe it or not. And she was also a member of the Prime Minister's Business Council. Well, thank God. Well, thank God she's no longer doing those 2 roles either. She's stepping down from both of those. Quite right too. More from William Clouston and myself coming next on Talk TV. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Just some breaking news that we told you about just a moment ago. Alison Rose, Dame Alison Rose, of course, the Dame of NatWest, is going to step down from 2 major Downing Street roles. She's already resigned from her role as CEO of NatWest. She's now also resigned from her role as a part of the Energy Efficiency Task Force within the Net Zero department, where she was appointed in February. And she's also resigned as a member of the Prime Minister's Business Council just last week. But it does go to show what we are up against. I mean, Rishi Sunak yesterday tweeted out after the Daily Mail's investigation into some dodgy law firms and how they help illegal asylum seekers coming to this country to stay here. Amongst the revelations today, some of the lawyers' offices saying, I can help you find a wife so you'll be able to stay in Britain. Well, marvellous. Well, now the Bar Council is in trouble because the Bar Council hit out at Rishi Sunak because he was having a go at the Labour Party, accusing him of politicising the business of the law. We're talking to William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party. And once again, William, I have to say, it looks as though another sort of lefty establishment organisation is piping up to have a go at the Conservative Party Prime Minister.
Yeah, I would call them progressives rather than lefties, being on the economic left myself. But yeah, no, I mean, Sunak was quite right to speak up. because, and I think the Bar Council is wrong to call him out for speaking up, because effectively you've got some bent solicitors who are tutoring people and fabricating evidence to get them into the country, and I think that's just reprehensible. It's not news, Mike. Anyone that's been well informed about this. Well, this has been going on for many years.
Well, I've been saying it for years, that this is what's been going on, that, you know, everybody knows that there are charities, there are non-governmental organisations, NGOs, there are also lawyers who are helping these people come here illegally and helping them to stay here.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, actually, if you look at the Daily Mail's investigation, you look at the footage, the people were advised to, you know, fabricate marriages or political affiliation,
or depression
in India. Yeah, but in fact, there's a more economical way that you could do it, which is just you know, advise your client to say they're gay. Yeah, because actually, on that basis, under the existing rules, anyone. I mean, there's so many countries around the world, Mike. You know, so many African countries, a lot of Asian countries, gay rights are not a thing, and you know, you can qualify on that. So if we keep these protocols in place, these outdated post-war protocols, we'll have basically an open door to this sort of thing, which is why in the SDP anyway, we argue that you've got to look at them and remove them and get a grip.
Well, exactly right. It will come as no surprise to you, of course, that the man who made the comments from the Bar Council, who's the Vice Chairman, Sam Townend, KC, is a former Labour Party candidate and a former councillor for the Labour Party in Lambeth. He ran as Labour MP for Reigate in 2005 and then again for Bristol North West in 2010, losing both times. But, you know, since when did all of our kind of establishment organisations like the Bar Council, like the banks, like the civil service, suddenly become these kind of woke, and I'm going to say lefty, even though I know you're going to object to it, woke sort of lefty champagne socialist types who seem to think that every Tory is an evil Tory and an evil individual, and they must instead absolutely crusade for get Labour into power. I can't wait for Labour to be the next government, because they're going to be useless, and I'm going to wait and see what these people have to say about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've said before that, you know, 18 months into, I mean, Labour probably will win the next election somehow. And, you know, 18 months into their term of office, I think they're going to be desperately unpopular because they won't make any progress. In fact, I think certain things will go backwards.
They will.
Yeah, I mean, but at the root of this, why has this happened? Well, because the people, activists, have got into organisations and view the organisation as a vehicle for their activism, not for a vehicle for doing what the primary purpose of the thing is. Right. And this is happening everywhere. You know, I believe it or not, I occasionally attend church. I'm not a believer, but I attended an Anglican church in central London about 3 months ago. And I couldn't believe what I saw. You know, you might have a sort of form of worship or whatever. No, it was about activism. And I'm not making this up, Mike. At the end of the service, they had a series of announcements about various activities, one of which included where you could pick up your placard to campaign for net zero. I mean, I'm not joking. This is, you know, I thought we might.
God.
Honestly, I'm not making it up. And I said to Rod Little, I mentioned to Rod Little about it, and he said, I'm not surprised at all this is happening. Yeah. You know, and it was, I'll find another church, you know.
Unbelievable. Well, we never got to it, but I should mention before we go this latest NHS ridiculousness, which is the gratitude ponchos. I don't know whether you've seen this in the Telegraph this morning. And a strategic advisor to NHS Horizons has decided this is a great way for people in the NHS to appreciate each other, where they wear these ponchos with things written on them. We sort of had a little joke about it with Kevin O'Sullivan this morning. So I said, if we did it around here, people would not be writing very nice things on the poncho. They'd be writing sort of, you know, insults on it, just because that's what we should be doing. But it's pathetic. You know, just, again, get on with your job, help sick people, make them better. Don't keep congratulating yourself on how brilliant you are.
Yeah, when I see stories like that, I always sort of scratch my head and wonder, how did this country win a world war, you know, or contribute to winning a world war? It's unbelievable. It seems to me that the things that mentors should be showing people is fortitude, strength, duty. You know, these are virtues, and instead we're concentrating on writing nice little messages and cheering people up with these sort of gimmicks. And I noticed actually that this one didn't last very long. But remember, Mike, at the root of this, taxpayers are paying for this nonsense.
Of course they are. Absolutely disgraceful. William, great to talk to you as ever. William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party there with